Alright, so I used to do the series where I looked at all of my commander decks, one by one, showed up the cards, showed the combinations, what the deck was designed to do, and the question I was trying to ask was, what's the power level? I realize now that's the wrong question. The wrong question because what is the power level is usually answered in a vacuum. Usually answered without considering what you're likely to play, what sort of environment you're in, what cards you might be running that some of your mates may object to. So let's ask the right question. Voja, are you a fair deck? And if you're not, are you unfair because you are inherently a broken, unfair card? Or are you unfair because of certain cards in your deck that maybe I could take out? So what is Voja? Voja is a 2/5. 2/5, Jesus Christ. He's a 5/5 for 5. 2, 1 green, 1 red, 1 white. So 5/5 with Vigilance, Trample, and War 3. Hey, that's pretty good. That's not bad stats. Whenever he attacks, put X plus and plus counters each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control. Draw a card for each wolf you control. So Voja, all by himself, hits for 5. He's got Trample. He can defend you because he has Vigilance. And he's hard to take off the battlefield because of the Ward. And when he attacks, if he attacks all by himself, you get to draw a card. So 5/5 for 5 that does all that. That's pretty good. And as Pleasant Kenobi said, this is an example of push design. I saw that video of his where he talked about it, talked about how kind of mindless Voja is. After I started investing into it, after I started already acquiring cards specifically for the deck. Because my original plan was I was going to take my elf deck, which wasn't working when it was Karth's Tavern of Jund, take the elves, add in some wolves, put them under Voja, and go. That did not work. That didn't work because in my collection I only had 6 wolves besides Voja, and 3 of them were shapeshifters, so it didn't quite feel right. And running him as some kind of elf ball deck, tribal elves, pumping the elves, elf lords, doesn't really suit his strengths, doesn't really feed into what he can do, because you need a lot of wolves in order to draw those cards. And you want to draw cards because drawing cards is good. It's always good to draw cards. Unless your opponent is playing Nekazar, then it might be bad to draw cards, but that's another discussion entirely. So, Voja himself, I would say, is strong. It is push design. It is somewhat mindless depending on your play environment. My play environment, I cannot play him mindlessly with just a stack of elves, a stack of wolves, and go, because my opponents will kill all my elves, kill all my wolves, blow up my board, and in general, throw them a big spanner in my my plan. Just wreck my gears. So what I've done is I built Voja to be more resilient. I've got a number of creatures that aren't elves, aren't wolves, in order to make him shore up his weaknesses. Shore up his weaknesses, buff up his strengths. So let's look at that. But in and of himself, I would say that Voja is strong, but is fair. He would be more fair if the plus and plus encounter and the draw triggered on damage. That they triggered on attack, that's really damn good. Because he doesn't have to actually hit anything in order to do the damage. He doesn't have to, to get the counters. He doesn't have to actually hit anyone in order to get the counters. Even if it was damage to creatures, no, that wouldn't work. If it said whenever Voja jots with Conclave attacks, or whenever he deals damage to a creature, it would be the same thing. It would make no difference. It would have to say whenever he deals damage to a player, you do all this. If he said that, then it'd be more interesting. It'd be more difficult to push it through. I would change the deck to have more ways of evasion. That would be kind of a different deck entirely. Anyway, so he triggers on attack. So what do I have? I have mana elves. I have some wolves. Most of the creatures I have in here, I try to. My goal is to have them under CMC 3 in order to fall under the Allurin restriction. So Allurin is a 4-mana enchantment, 2 colorless, green, that says you can play a creature with CMC 3 or less for free as instants. So that's why I try to get as many 3 CMC or less elves and wolves as I could find that were still good. Okay, Wrath of God to control the board. And the problem with the Voja, problem with playing him, is if your opponents wipe the board, you're kind of stuck. It's hard starting all over again. If your opponents get away with casting Wrath of God, Damnation, Supreme Verdict, anything like that, farewell, any of that bullshit, then it's difficult to recover because you need to achieve that critical mass of elves to make your creatures big enough to be a threat, big enough not to die in combat, and you need that critical mass of wolves in order to draw cards. So the lands, one of the main complaints that my friends have been having, well, one friend in particular, is that I play too many bullshit lands. He started to realize that I've always played a lot of non-basics. I always played a lot of non-basics because I've always loved land cards. Ever since I started in the game, it's just been something I like. I like different lands. I like non-basic lands. Good ones. Don't really like Ghost Town too much, but I do own one for the art. Anyway, I digress. So what I'll do is I'll just stop on things that are not really broken, just strong. Maybe some things are broken. So the lands I don't really need to stop on, that's just mana fixing. Nobody cares about pain lands. Same with that, nobody cares about that. Mana elf. Path of Ancestry. With Voja it works. The deck has, I believe, 17 elves and about 13 wolves, including Voja. So it's elf heavy because there are not that many interesting wolves printed. There are not that many interesting wolves, at least to me, available for inclusion in the deck. Well, here's one of them. So whenever he attacks, all my creatures gain menace. So that's pretty good. And he's got Undying in case they do block him. Yeah, fetch land. Beast Whisper. Whenever cast a creature spell, draw a card. One of the few elves that has a CMC higher than 3. There's one of the lords for elves, but even if he did not give other elf creatures +1/+1, even if he was just a slightly stronger Priest of Titania, I would still have him. The main ways I'm ramping and generating mana in this deck is through elves. Through elves that when they come into play, I get to go find a land. Elves that they tap for mana. So that's the ramp suite. I don't have too many ramp spells in the deck. And in fact, the next one I'm going to hit on, I'm probably going to take out in order to give it to Carador. So Wandering Wolf, creature power less than Wandering Wolf's power can't block it, but it's only a 2/1, so who cares? Now, Wandering Wolf, if Voja gets working and he's in play, let's say I've got 3 elves and I attack. So he becomes a 5/4, and that's on attack. That's before blockers have been declared. So right away he's a 5/4. So yeah, Voja can be strong. Runebound Wolf, really only good if I've got a number of 1/1 counters on him. 3 visits, probably going to take this out. If I don't have a Nature's Lore in this deck, and I forget if I do or don't, I'm going to take this out for Carador because he has a Nature's Lore but not a 3 visits, and it's probably better that I take out Skyshard Claim, which costs 4, in favor of 3 visits, which costs 2, in order to speed him up a bit because Carador is a fair deck because Kyrador plays like an old precon. Even though there's a lot of powerful cards, I'm not doing powerful things. I'm just playing with spirits. So let's set that to the side. Sun Titan, yeah, not broken. Just good card. Rootbound Crag. Okay, so the deck, the first iteration had Gaia's Cradle. And then when I built Korvold, I took out the Gaia's Cradle for Korvold because Voja, the whole game plan in the way I've built the deck is to have a lot of creatures in play. So hitting the 4 creatures at the end of a turn, at the end of my turn, should be pretty easy with Voja. With Korvold, because I'm killing my creatures to sacrifice, it's a lot more iffy. So Korvold got the Gaia's Cradle. So anyway, Gaia's Cradle is one of the cards that the lads like to touch on as being a bullshit card that is too strong for casual and I shouldn't play. Okay, what about this Gaia's Cradle? Because I am functionally, in this deck, it is functionally Gaia's Cradle, because I will cast the enchantment, Growing Arts of Itlimoc. I will find something, maybe, who cares, but on turn 3, turn 4, I should have 4 creatures or 3 creatures around that time. So within a turn of this coming into play, I should meet the condition and flip it into Gaia's Cradle. Just the way Voja works. With Korvold, although I'm putting in more token generators, so maybe I'll have to rethink Korvold too, because I do have a second Growing Arts of Itlimoc. But then that just means the Gaia's Cradle goes somewhere else. So Gaia's Cradle is not in the deck. So that takes out one bone of contention. She's not that strong. Ghostway. So in order to keep my board around, I have a number of ways of exiling or putting into I hate it when my brain fucking freezes. Work, god damn it, work. Fucking find the word. Anyway, when I find it, I'll show it to you. So this has a little bit of dust in it. Let me get that dust out. There we go. So I have a number of ways of exiling all the creatures I control in response to a board wipe. So somebody's going to Farewell, Damnation, whatever. My creatures will check out for a turn and then come back, because I need to have a certain presence on the board in order for Voja to work, as I explained. Land, yeah, there we go. So another one, exile any number of target creatures or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of the next end step, they come back. They come back bigger if they're creatures. They come back with more loyalty if they're planeswalkers. 4 mana instant. And that's why there's nothing in the deck that has protection from white, because this targets. I didn't realize it at first. When I had it in another deck, make sure you read your cards. Okay, there's Cultivate. This is not a broken land at all. Okay, untap when target off. And what? And this guy. So he gets +0/+2 and yellow cost 2. So you can see I've got a lot of cheap elves, a lot of cheap creatures. Now this mad woman, she's strong. She's borderline oppressive. Of the 5 legendary predators from New Phyrexia, the only ones I would say that are fair are Urbrask, because he just gives your stuff haste and he makes your opponent's creatures come into play tapped. Okay, and what? That's why it's reflected in his secondary market price as well. Right now, a foil one is only about 13-15 euro. Her foil is, I think, about 40 or 50, maybe higher. And then you've got damn Jin Gitaxias, that oppressive bastard. You cheat him into play and you just wreck your opponent's hands. Shieldred is kind of fair, because she makes your opponent sacrifice a creature. They get to choose the creature. Okay, I'll sacrifice this crappy little token I don't care about. Okay, that's not really having the effect I want, but alright. I still get to return a creature from my graveyard to play once per turn during my turn. And she has Swamp Walk. Voja doubles your mana, keeps your opponent's lands tapped if they tapped them the previous turn. That's oppressive. So Elish Norn falls right in the middle there. She costs 7, which isn't really a consideration in this deck if I get Defense of the Heart, which I have before. So she costs 7, and she buffs your team, and she kills all your opponent's small creatures permanently, as long as she's in play. She just keeps doing it. That's really strong. Because of the mana cost, I would still put her in the fair category with a question mark. Voja and Jin-Gitaxias, oh hell no. Urabrask and Sheoldred, the whispering one, yeah, they're fine. But when I've got shit like this, so this is another point of contention, Defense of the Heart. Because I'm not going to cast it unless my opponent's, one of them, any of them, has 3 creatures, or it looks like they're going to play a 3rd creature before my next untap step, because they need a creature. So at the beginning of my upkeep, if an opponent controls 3 more creatures, I can sacrifice this, go find 2 creature cards in my library, put them into play, then shuffle. So this is quite strong. As far as fair, as far as being broken, because it's an enchantment that does cost 4, and if you're in a 4-man game, you've got 3 lads that each have an opportunity to destroy it before it can trigger on your upkeep. Whether or not they have the capacity to do it is another question entirely, but the option is still there. And then you go find 2 creatures for free. So I would say that's a fair card. If and it kind of depends what you're searching for. Searching for Elish Norn probably pushes it above the fair category. But in and of itself, I would say it's a fair. I would say it's not broken. Of course, I'm the one playing it, so my judgment is suspect. A little bit of haste, fetch land, swords. Okay, this card can be mega broken. In fact, this card is the reason I will not have a Chulane Teller of Tales deck, because if I had Chulane, I would have this card in there, and I would make Chulane just broken. And you say, well, you don't have to do that. My response is that's the only reason I would play Chulane, is to do broken shit. That's the only reason I would have him as my commander, and I would gear the deck to dumping my library into play, giving everything haste, making everything bigger on the cheap because of what he does. You play a creature, you draw a card, and you can play another land. So if I have Valoran, I could play a creature for free, draw a card, oh, it's a land, I play a land. And to have enough creatures to keep this going. So that's why I do not have Chulane, because that's exactly what I would play, and I would be doing broken shit, and it would not be a fair deck. Mirror Entity. He's not broken at all. I mean, he's just fair. But in this deck, it's, case by case. Is he broken in this deck? It depends on how many creatures I have. It depends how much mana I have. So if I have, say, he's my 4th creature. I have 3 other creatures. Let's say 2 are elves, 1 is Voja. Okay, so I make them all 4/4, base 4/4 with all creature types and attack. So they all get +4/+4, including him, and I draw 4 cards. Is that broken? Is that unfair? Borderline, but even the precons these days can do crap like that. Even the good precons that they're putting out. Now if I have 7 creatures, and I do this, and I say I have 7 mana, so they're all 7/7s, and they all get +7/7 because they all get 7+1+ encounters each, and I draw 7 cards. Yeah, that's pretty strong. That's not really fair. But he's only 1 card in the deck. I have no way of searching for him because I don't have a way of finding white creatures. I do have green Sun Zenith to find a green creature. So I'm not sure exactly how to classify this card on the fairness scale. I should actually think of that, the fairness scale. 1 being a basic land, you can't get much more fair than that. And I guess 10 on the fairness scale would be something like Shroom, Sculpting Steel, Disciple the Vault combo. Kill everybody. So in this deck, he's strong, but he closes out the game. Give me your thoughts. Do you think he's too strong for this deck? Do you think that I'm being an asshole for playing him? Or do you think it's just, okay, it closes out the game? Because if he comes down and he works, the game isn't going to go much longer. Unless I can't stop a Wrath, and then all my things die and I have to start all over again. Hungry Ridge Wolf, okay, so he can be a 3/2 Trampler. Priest of Titania. Elvish Harbinger. Inigo Montoya. Okay, still haven't played this guy. I haven't taken Voja to the Thursday pub night since including him in the deck. I still expect to get a lot of shit for it because it is from Universes Beyond. And I have been pretty open about how much I don't like to mix Universes Beyond with my Magic cards. And then the deck wanted Samut. The deck had an Urabrask the Hidden, but Aurelie needed more because she is red and white. Samut, the Voice of Dissent, is green and red. He fits the deck. He does more stuff. He's more interesting. He's got this untap another target creature ability, which is interesting. Except I don't like the way Samut looks. I don't like the art. It looks like he's constipated. It looks like he's bending over in pain from his some gas in his bowels. But they had Inigo Montoya. So I bought Inigo Montoya for Voja. And he's from Universes Beyond. So there's that. Pharisee of Maya just makes my stuff hasty. This guy, perfectly fair. Whenever wolf or werewolf you control becomes the target of an instant or sorcery, I get a green wolf token. I'm not targeting my stuff, and when my opponents target my stuff, it doesn't happen that often that they target specifically my wolves in this deck. Usually they're trying to target Voja, if anything. So I don't get that many wolves out of him. He's just kind of there to be another wolf. And sometimes I get an extra 2/2 wolf token. Yeah, who knows. So phase out. That's the word I was trying to remember when my brain froze. It gave me a 404 error. Fucking brain. So Guardian of Faith comes into play. Any number of other target creatures you control phase out. So he targets 2. So that's why I can't really have protection from white, because I want to save the board. If something randomly has protection from white, it's going to die. Yeah. I don't know. This one, so this is reserved list. It was as high as 150 euros a year ago. It's now down to 50 euros. It's lost a lot of its value. I keep telling my mates, you should pick one of these up. You should pick one of these up, and maybe 2. Put one in at least one of your green decks. It's fun. It's a good card. It just sits there and it can protect one of your creatures, regenerate it. But they don't want to listen to me because it does cost 50 euro. And that's the price of an entire new commander deck. So their way of thinking is, if they have 50 euros to spend on Magic cards, they're going to buy an entirely new commander deck. Because they're good these days, they're playable, they're fun. I'm going to get something like this. I'm going to get one card that I either am overpaying for because it's a special art foil, as with the skull clamp that I want to get a Secret Lair foil skull clamp because I really like the art. Or something like this. Luckily I bought all these when they were cheap, so these are well represented across my green decks. I have 9 copies of Yevmaya Hollow. Again, I bought them when they were cheap. But nobody has really called this out as a bullshit card. Nobody has really said this is unfair, because it only regenerates 1 creature, and I can only do it once per cycle of turns. So if I do it on my turn, my opponents have 3 turns in order to kill the creature that I was trying to regenerate, that I regenerated on my turn, because this is tapped, this is down. So I would put that in the fair category. I wouldn't really call that a bullshit card. Cemetery Prowler. He forces me to exile a card from graveyard. I don't like that, but he has a 3/4 wolf. And he does have this interesting ability. Spells you cast cost 1 less for each card type they share with cards exiled with Cemetery Prowler. So when he enters the battlefield, I'll probably exile somebody's creature. To make my creatures cheaper, when he attacks, I'll probably go for either enchantment or instant, because I have a number of instants. I do not have too many sorceries. I only have 2 artifacts. I have 1 planeswalker, no, 2 planeswalkers, so not that many. And this guy is fair, I would say, but I still don't like that I have to exile something. I understand why they did it though. Pestilent Wolf, he can give him Death Touch, but it costs 3, costs a lot of mana. This card in this deck, this is bonkers. This is nutty. This has won me games. So Shalayan Halar, it's an elf. So it triggers the +1/+1 counter whenever Voja attacks. It only costs 4. It's a 3/3 flying vigilance. So you can knock it out with a lightning bolt, lightning helix. There's a lot of things that can knock it out, but if it's on the board when I attack, if I have, say, 6 creatures, including Voja and Shalayan Halar. So I've got them and 4 others. Let's say 2 elves, 2 wolves. So they attack. Well, Voja attacks. And all of those creatures will get 3 +1/+1 counters. So that's 18 +1/+1 counters collectively. So off 1 attack with only 6 creatures, I can deal an additional 18 points of damage to one of my opponents. That's probably not fair. That's probably borderline oppressive. But this is the card I would call out if I were playing against this as bullshit more than a Guy's Cradle. Because a Guy's Cradle just lets me do things faster. Yes, it is powerful. Yes, it is expensive. It's reserve list. It can generate a shitload of mana, and usually does. But this thing, I don't have to attack with it. I don't have to jump through any hoops. I don't have to spend life. All I have to do is somehow figure out a way in Naya to get +1/+1 counters going on a bunch of creatures, and this can hurt somebody real bad. So this is probably not a fair card in Voja. So this card is probably what's making Voja feel unfair. Command Tower, High Market, Jungle Shrine, Reconnaissance. Okay, Voja triggers on attacks. So I want to attack. I want to be able to attack without having to consider it too much, without having to think about it too much. And sometimes that means I want to attack when it's not auspicious, when I'm being presented a lot of potential unfavorable trades. So if I have Shalayan Halar, let's get them back. If I have Shalayan Halar, Reconnaissance, and Voja, that means I can attack, and if I don't like the attack, I pull back whatever creatures are going to die. They still get the +1/+1 counters, And then I can do it again. Camera's going to go off. Alright, picking up right away from where I left off. So Reconnaissance, it's not an unfair card. It doesn't do anything else. All it does is it allows you to remove attacking creatures from combat. And it untaps. So it can give some creatures pseudo-vigilance. It can let you run through attack triggers, like his, with abandon. And if I have this in play, it gets that much worse. If I do not have Shalai and Halar, Reconnaissance is just a neat little combat trick. Turn to forest and tap creature only once per turn. Scroll rack. Yeah, nothing unfair about scroll rack. All you're doing is digging, and once you've dug the first time, since you put those cards back on top, you're not seeing anything new. You're not really drawing anything new. You have to shuffle your library somehow in order to see different cards. Reliquary Tower. Kind of a bullshit land. If I'm going to be drawing a lot of cards, I want to make sure I don't have a maximum hand size though. But I would say that there's nothing unfair about Reliquary Tower because, for one, it's ubiquitous. It's cheap, anybody can play it. You have no maximum hand size. All it does is allow you to keep your options. And some decks actually don't want this. Some decks want to discard their hands at the end of the turn in order to fill their graveyard. Voja is not one of them. Counterspell. A very fair counterspell because it costs 3. And it goes back on top of the library. So next turn they can cast it again. And you won't have a counterspell because you're not playing blue. Okay, so Fauna Shaman. Survival of the Fittest on a 2/2 body. It's only a 2/2, so I would say this is not. Survival of the Fittest is strong, and one of the reasons that it's strong is because it's an enchantment, and everybody in the game thinks about, or at least should think about, ways to kill creatures. A lot of people don't really think about ways of killing enchantments, but that's on them. I always think about that in all of my decks. Okay, how am I going to deal with an enchantment? But I still have it less than how am I going to deal with creatures. So her being a creature, her having summoning sickness, unless I have a haste enabler, makes her a fair card. Fairer than Survival of the Fittest, which I still say is not a broken card. Or it's Mutavault. Mutavault's cool in this deck because at the end of my first pre-combat main phase, before I attack, if Voja is in play, I can tap this for 1 mana and use that mana to make it a 2/2 elf, wolf, angel, everything. So when I attack with Voja, Mutavault, just by tapping, gives me an additional +1/+1 counter for the elf and additional card draw for the wolf. Is that fair? I don't know. I am not sure how they would do a card that says basically tap this land. If you would attack with your commander this turn, put a +1/+1 counter each creature you control and draw a card. They would probably have it cost 3 to activate, not just 1. But if they had it where it's ubiquitous, where it applies to any commander, that's why it would cost 3. This only works in Voja. I can't think of another commander where that ability would work. Even with Edgar Markov, Mutavault doesn't do a whole lot. But in Voja, it's kind of a good card. Niche card to play. Okay, there's another protection spell. Wolfir Silverheart. He costs 5, 4/4. But if he's paired another creature, and he would be, he'd be an 8/8. Not bad. I mean, you've got Colonial Hydra. Whenever Colonial Hydra attacks, you double the +1/+1 counters on it. I think every creature you control, isn't it? I'd have to read that again, but it costs the same as a Colonial Hydra. Costs the same as an Elder Gargaroth. So I'd say that is in the fair category with the level of power Wizards is putting out these days. Skull's Sculptor. It's only a 1/1. Nothing unfair about this card. It just makes a creature an enchantment and lose all abilities until somebody casts a creature spell. So all it does is it freezes a creature until somebody casts another creature, which is going to happen pretty damn quickly, sometimes in the same turn, if they have something with flash. This is mainly here to stop Eldrazi bullshit. This guy is perfectly fair because he just goads your opponent's creatures. He costs a lot. You have to jump through some hoops in order for him to do it. He's fun. He's interesting. He is entertaining to play. So he's not really broken. Lane Tutor, just go find an artifact enchantment. Yeah, a lot of searching in Commander. Asceticism. Gives my creatures hexproof. Lets me regenerate them. Costs 5. And it can be destroyed. Shut down my opponent's artifacts, but make them into creatures. I'd say this is fair. I'd say this is just a acceptable strategy for this deck. I'm not running that many artifacts. And it's one of those things where, and they've done this more in the past. What Wizards wanted to do, and they don't seem to be doing it as much these days, is if anybody relies on one strategy too heavily, there should be something that punishes them for it. There should be something that invalidates or impinges upon that strategy. If you're playing heavy artifacts, Titania Song impinges on the strategy. Against my Shroom deck, Titania Song would be interesting because I made it more of a artifact creature attack deck, but it wouldn't knock me out of the game. It doesn't destroy all the artifacts. It just makes them the creatures and makes my non-creature artifacts that I have for the abilities unusable, other than as beaters and blockers. So I would say this is a perfectly fair card. Sylvan Ranger, yeah, go find a land. Anara, as long as your turn, commanders you control of indestructible. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. They're doing a lot of these commander things. Get a card out of your library, out of your graveyard, put it in your hand, and tap a creature. Green Sun Zenith. So you have to spend the mana, but you get to find a green creature. It has to be green. I can't get Elder Shorn out with this. I can't get Urabrask out of this, and that's why Urabrask was replaced with Inigo Montoya, because I can go find him, and he's cool, and he does shit. But as for repeatable, if you can draw it again, Nomade Shepherd. Stomp the ground, Genesis Wave. Yeah, this is cool. Costs a lot of mana. It's one of those big splashy spells that people cast that you only do it if you have a lot of mana. Otherwise, you look at the top 4 and it's not very impressive. You want to do this for about 7 or 8, as much as you can. Vivian Reed, you know, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can show a creature, put in your hand. Not interplayed in your hand, so that's a perfectly fair filtering ability. And that's reflected in her secondary market price of nearly nothing. She's mainly here for the destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Never had the emblem. I don't think I've had her in play but once, so I think she died before I got the emblem. Nature Dollar. So let's recap. Is Voja unfair? I would say no. Voja in and of himself is not unfair. It's pushed. It's strong. It builds itself to some degree. Stack up elves, stack up wolves, put lands, and go. And you can play that. And as long as if your opponents are not ready for it, if they're not playing intensive creature strategies that can block your creatures and kill them or wipe them, then they get overrun. And if you have the wolves, you're gaining a lot of card advantage. So, broken, unfair, no. Very, very strong, yes. But he's on par with a lot of other commanders that people are playing these days, especially in my play group. Mirror Entity, Alurin, Defense of the Heart, not Elish Norn, but Defense of the Heart. Because Elish Norn, if I don't have defense, I have to have 7 mana to get her in play. By that time, anybody playing blue is probably sandbagging a counter spell, and they're going to counter her. Guy's Cradle. What I'm doing now is I'm just pulling out the cards that I touched on as the ones that really push Voja over the top. The ones that make him feel unfair. Just to consider them together. Consider them without the whole of the deck. If you think there are other cards that I'm passing over that are unfair, are uncalled for in Voja, do let me know. Do tell me, because I'm curious to see if how people see this differently. So, Mirror Entity. If I have sufficient mana, he can be unfair. If I make all my creatures into 1/1s, if I only have 1 mana available, and I'm doing it for some reason because I think I'm going to get a bunch of counters. Let's say I have 8 creatures, and I make them all into 1/1s, and then attack. If anybody has any spell that does 1 point of damage to all my creatures, then they die, because I have to trigger him before he attacks in order for all of them to be wolves and elves to get the counters. So when I do that, my opponents, if they have any such cards, can do 1 point of damage to all my creatures and kill them. Even 2. Are there any instances that do 2 points of damage to all creatures? I can't think of any offhand. I think Flame Break is a sorcery, but none of the lads play it. So Mirror Entity is borderline oppressive in this deck. Shalai and Halar. Sometimes I think I should take this out. I've been thinking about this. I should take this out, but I need to close out the game somehow. Every game has to end. And since I have to attack with this in play, that lets me tell myself my opponents have a chance against it. My opponents have a way to deal with it. So I play Shalai Halar. I say, okay, I go to combat. Alright, screw you, Swords of Plowshares, Shalai Halar. They die. Oh, okay. So I'm not going to get as big an outcome of the attack, but I'm still going to attack. Goring Rites of Itlamok. In this deck, this is just basically Gaia's Cradle that comes into play and doesn't become Cradle until the end of my turn. Kind of Gaia's Cradle with some kind of phasing. But I think it's fair in this deck because it does start as an enchantment. Defense of the Heart. If I wasn't looking for Elish Norn, this would probably be more fair. As it is, it has to sit there and everybody gets 1 turn. So there's 3 other turns going around before I get to trigger it. And let's say somebody wipes the board. Nobody has 3 creatures anymore. Well, then I have to wait for people to build up. Allurin. Now, this is interesting because anybody can do this. Anybody can play a creature CMC 3 or less as an instant whenever they can just do it. So I am planning to do it and dumping my hand. So when I attack with Voja and I get a bunch of more fresh wolves and elves in my hand, at the end of the turn of the opponent preceding me, I can dump my hand with Allurin. My opponents also get to dump their hands because their decks have not been built for this. Their decks haven't even taken this into consideration. It's not as strong as when I'm doing, but against the Genie's fairy deck, it can draw a lot of cards. And most fairies are cheap, so he can dump his hands and they get a bunch of flyers that have Shroud, that pump each other, that do nasty things when they hit your opponent. And if you saw Voja, he doesn't have a lot to defend against flyers. Not much at all. So I'm attacking on the ground, he's attacking in the air, and we're kind of racing each other. other players' decks that have a lot of low casting cost creatures, they can take advantage of this too. So the symmetry is there. It's not even, but it's still there. So I'm going to say this Allurin is a fair card. And really, in Voja, the only cards I have that make it oppressive, potentially, are these three. So what do you think? Do you think I'm full of shit? Do you think I'm just justifying my bad deck making decisions? Or do you agree? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to lick and subscribe. Lick that subscribe button. Lick it.